In this video, we're going to go over military operations on urbanized terrain, starting with some simple movement techniques. First, turning corners. We have a fire team here in the column formation coming up on an intersection. As this fire team approaches the intersection, the first two members of the fire team are going to post security on the near side. Latter two are going to move through the intersection to the other side and provide security on the far side. If this is the only fire team in motion, then they can consolidate at this point and continue along their path of movement. If the rest of the squad is passing through this formation, the fire team here will remain on security or get replaced by one of the other fire teams and fall back into the formation as they continue moving. We're going to go over a few methods of crossing streets, or LDAs, linear danger areas. In this first example, we have a fire team here, and as the fire team approaches that corner, the first man is going to move to the corner and post up, providing security down the road. The second member is going to bump to the opposite side of the street and provide security from the opposite side. Then 3 and 4 are going to move across. Once 3 out of the 4 have safely moved across, the last man will move across and consolidate with the rest of the fire team before continuing movement. Alternate method here. The first man once again posts up on the street corner and the rest of the fire team immediately moves to the other side. The first member that reaches the far side will provide security there, allowing the last man to consolidate. Third method. So once again, the first member posts up, providing security down the road, and the second member is basically pieing the street angle as the rest of the fire team moves behind and across to the other side. Once that second member is posted up, then the last man can move across and consolidate. At this point, it's also important to go over some exterior analysis. So the idea here is to get an idea, a semblance of an idea of what might be inside of a structure when you're looking at it from the outside. So, for example, here we see a 2-story building and a door on the right side, 2 windows on the ground floor, and roof access. So we would expect a staircase either inside or somewhere along the exterior of the building that grants us roof access. It's possible that there might be a wall or a partition in between the 2 windows on the ground floor or the window and door. The door being on the right side, it's not quite a corner fed and it's somewhat of a center fed. You might have some dead space on the right side of that door. Another example here, we see a single-story structure in a walled compound. The door is located in the center of the building there. If you look at the rooftops and notice difference in height, that might suggest that there are multiple rooms inside the structure. Obviously, we see a window on the right side. This is a bit of a more complex structure. Obviously, with the door on the ground floor, you see a window up top and a balcony off to the left. Upon making entry, you may or may not have access to the adjacent building to the right, but we're not sure until we either see it from another angle to confirm or our interior. Also, we will expect either a stairwell or a staircase on the exterior that leads to the balcony, and access to and from the second story. Another example of a more congested, more complex set of structures here. If we have an isolated building that we are determining to clear, then we would conduct analysis on that and be mindful of other potential threats in that compound while we are approaching and making entry. So, for example, to the right of the gate you have one structure, and to the right of that you have a 2-story building with a door on the ground floor, a door on the second floor that's accessible through an exterior staircase. You can have roof access, and there are multiple windows. If we look at the two buildings on either side of the gate, we see doorways on the ground floor, windows on the ground and second floor, and there's obviously a way to access the second floor. And two buildings might conjoin, conducting assault with support and security on an isolated building. Here we see two fire teams in the field. One is going to serve as our support by fire or security element, the other as the assault element. So once the security element is set and has their field of fire, the assault element can initiate their assault. Notice that as the assault element is approaching and entering the field of fire, the support element will shift the right limit, pulling it in to the left as to not catch their friendlies in the line of fire. Here's another example. Fire team providing external security here. We have another fire team that will conduct the assault. So once again, field of fire for the security element is shown as such. As the assault element is approaching, notice they are in a skirmishers formation. Skirmishers right because the assist man is off and to the right. Of course, the skirmishers formation is used when you are crossing short open distances. So as an assault element is moving forward towards the target compound, the security element is shifting their field of fire, pulling in that right limit. As the assaulting fire team closes in with the isolated compound, two of the members will provide security while the other two stage and prepare to make entry. Fire team will then consolidate and make entry. To go over a few CQB concepts now. Some of these are going to overlap or blend together a little bit. But first we're going to talk about the management of angles. So as you are taking more angles, you are trying to manage your exposure to multiple angles. So you take ones that you can manage at any given point in time because we are able to point our muzzle in one direction. It's important to avoid, as stated, exposure to multiple angles whenever possible and avoiding overpenetration. Ideally, we want to try to clear as much of the interior of a room or structure from the exterior as possible, i.e., prior to crossing the threshold and making entry, if there are viewing ports or windows that allow line of sight, line of fire into the room, utilize those to clear the interior as much as possible before entering. And as we are taking new angles, avoid seating previously secured angles. You've taken them, you currently have them, and it's going to take more work and more risk to retake them if we give them up. Pacing is very important. The phrase here is to be aggressive enough, quickly enough. Emphasis on the word enough. There will be certain points in time where you want to be aggressive and violent, and other times where a slower, more methodical pacing is what's more appropriate for the situation. And finally on to dynamic versus deliberate and dynamic versus stealth versus subdued entries. So in the former sense, conducting CQB dynamically means utilizing speed, surprise, and violence of action. You are communicating verbally. You might be utilizing breaching charges if doors are otherwise locked and access is prevented, or using charges to create new points of entry altogether. Not much, if any, consideration is used to maintain stealth. The idea is to clear the compound or structure violently and quickly, disrupting the enemy's ability to organize. When you are clearing deliberately, there's going to be more emphasis on coming up with a plan of clearing prior to conducting the assault. You are going to take extra care to employ the CQB concepts previously mentioned, such as the management of angles, limiting overpenetration, and exposure to multiple angles. The execution might be conducted in phases, and this is ultimately used in an effort to minimize risk to personnel. Likewise, a dynamic entry is when you are making entry and clearing out the compound as quickly as possible. You are communicating verbally, again with little to no consideration of maintaining stealth. A stealth entry, on the other hand, you are trying to avoid detection. So, more prevalent is going to be the use of hand signals and gestures rather than verbal communication, as well as moving slowly in an effort to mask or obscure your position to the enemy while you are clearing the structure or compound. A subdued entry is a blend between dynamic and stealth. So if an entry starts off as a stealth entry, it might become dynamic if they're OP4 in one room or one part of the structure. There is an engagement, and immediately after, the effort is made to transition back to stealth. Now we'll go over how to handle thresholds. So here we have a fire team that's stacked up along this building here with a door in the middle of the screen. One man has moved off to the left side of the door in order to achieve a split stack. So from here we're going to take a look at the doorknob. Being that the door handle is on the left side, we know that the door swings out to the right. Next thing that we look for is hinges. If there are no hinges visible, the door opens inward. If they are visible, it opens outward. However, due to the modeling of many of the doors in game, no matter what, it might be hard to see some of these hinges. So you can alternatively look to see if the door is sunken into the frame. That would suggest that it opens inward, or rest more on the outside of the frame, suggesting that it opens outward. On one side of the door frame, we have a rifleman who has an obstructed view and a team member that has no obstruction. We refer to these as the concealment side and the fighting side, where the fire team member on the left has his line of sight obscured by the door, whereas on the right, that fire team member can fire straight into the room at a target if it is in that field of fire. So at this point, the fire team could simply make entry, or they could conduct a frag and clear. With one covering the entrance, another Marine will step into a position that allows him to arc a grenade into the room, and the team will conduct a dynamic entry after the shrapnel settles. It might also be appropriate to close the door before the grenade goes off, then open the door back up and make entry. We'll now go over how to clear certain types of rooms. Starting with a center-fed room, because the threshold is located near the center of the wall that feeds into the room, we see this fire team stacked up on the left side here. The point man is going to approach that threshold, and he is going to immediately be able to see into the right side of the room, with the exception of that deep right angle. He is then going to pie and take new angles from right to left until he is on the other side of the threshold. The number 2 man is going to take up his previous position and maintain coverage on the other side. So at this point, this fire team has already cleared roughly 85% of the room before making entry. Another technique here is to use the 45-90 entry. So the 45-90 entry may be redundant if one rifleman has already pied to the other side of the threshold and looked into the room, but if the fire team has approached in a split stack and nobody has yet been able to look in past the threshold into the room, then this is where this method would be more relevant. So from both sides of the door, the 2 fire team members are currently covering their 45-degree angles. They'll step center to cover the 90, make sure that's clear before moving back and conducting a cross breach. So when they cross breach, they will clear their immediate corners before following the wall to the next corner and clearing the rest of the room. So as we can see here, the rifleman that was previously on the left side of the door frame has moved into the right corner, clearing the immediate corner, and the rifleman on the right side is taking the immediate left corner. They will then move and follow the wall to the next corner. So another option is to button hook and clear those immediate angles. However, the preference is to conduct a cross breach. It allows the rifleman to take the path of least resistance and have some confidence in the direction in which they are traveling, because they're already able to see somewhat into that corner, and it saves time by not having to more or less conduct a 180-degree turn right in the middle of the threshold. So from here, 3 and 4 man are going to enter and take up the center right and center left of the room. At this point, it's good habit for number 4 man to make sure the threshold is still secure. The idea is to alternate movement here, so if number 1 man goes right, number 3 man goes right. If number 2 goes left, number 4 goes left. Masking is a technique that can be used when exiting rooms and compounds. As this fire team has cleared this room, they're going to now exit and move on to a different room. Alright, so if this fire team is moving off to the right and they want to clear that adjacent room, we have one rifleman exit and mask the left. That allows the rest of the fire team to move off to the right, and once they are all out, they can move along the wall towards the adjacent building. And that brings us to a corner fed room. So the point man here is going to once again pie that threshold, and immediately, very quickly, has eyes on that far right corner. And at this point, he is going to continue to pie, taking additional angles to the left. So from here, he is going to take the last corner that has not yet been cleared. That would be his deep left corner. It is an option also to move straight along the wall into the right corner and allow number 2 man to take the left corner. However, in this situation, it would be ideal to take the last corner that has not yet been cleared, adhering to the principle of management of angles and attempting to clear all the angles as quickly as possible before or upon crossing the threshold. Number 2 man, of course, goes right. 3 and 4 go left and right as well, taking up the center sectors of the room and making sure that the threshold is once again secure. Here we also have an obstruction, being the bed. This rifleman down here along the bottom wall has somewhat of an obstruction to whatever might be behind this piece of furniture. So this rifleman up here is going to move so that he can obtain an angle into that obstructed dead space. Room is now clear. Here we have a T intersection hallway, because at the end of the intersection you see that the hallway splits off to the left and to the right. So this fire team here is in a split stack, and they're going to make entry down the corridor. And as they approach this intersection, the 2 Marines in front are going to check the alternate sides as these additional angles become available to them before button hooking and switching their sides. The latter 2 in the team will move to the opposite side of the wall, and the hallway is now cleared. This, of course, is an L intersection hallway. So as one rifleman posts up and takes this corner, the rifleman on the other side is going to move to the opposite wall. As they push down the corridor, 3 and 4 are close behind. Another method of clearing L intersections and corner fed rooms is the lateral bound snap, also sometimes referred to as running the rabbit. The fire team is stacked up here, and the first man is going to point his muzzle down the long corridor and move to the opposite side of the wall, as the second man immediately will snap around and post up on that corner. This hopes to achieve 2 muzzles on 1 target. and as well to distract any potential enemy as another rifleman posts up on that corner. Okay, so this is the ground floor of the 3-story structure that was in one of the earlier examples, and so that fire team has made entry into the compound and is using this window to gain lines of sight into the first floor before making entry. They've then made entry, and we see a staircase. So one fire team member is going to move up and plug the stairs, and the rest are going to make sure that first floor is clear. Of course, it's always a good habit to secure the threshold. So this team is now stacked up and ready to ascend the staircase. Another principle we want to employ here is limiting over penetration. So we see a much more complex set of rooms here. So once again, number 1 man is pieing while also noticing that there is an open door beyond the threshold on the far right side of the room. He also sees an open door on the left side of the room, and this is communicated to the rest of the fire team, and they conduct a cross breach, clearing their immediate hard angles. The fire team has now made entry into the first room, and they're now going to focus on how to clear the adjacent rooms. So we see this rifleman over here. He is being mindful of that open threshold as that pair moves towards the threshold of the room on the left. So in this case, because it would be less than ideal to pie that room and get on the other side of the threshold, that number 1 man is going to conduct a button hook, thus clearing the last angle that has not yet been cleared, and his teammate is going to push into the opposite angle. They're going to clear their immediate hard corners and follow the wall, clearing the rest of the room as well as any obstructions. Here we see the team now exiting, and the entire fire team is now preparing to make entry into the final room. So while this room is not a perfect corner-fed room, it still allows this rifleman to clear that corner before anybody makes entry into this room. In this case, it would be appropriate to first clear the last angles on the left, so they're going to tell this fire team member to enter first, and of course number 2 will take the opposite side. They are taking their hard corners before following the wall to the next corner. Of course, we once again have an obstruction here, and that is now clear. That is all the content that is in this slide deck, but keep in mind that this slide deck represents common situations that we will run into in the field, but is not all-encompassing, and this is not a replacement for actual live training on the team level, and does not represent every single situation that we will encounter.